Hello, Jeffrey Martin here, Director of the Center for the Study of Non-Symbolic Consciousness and a research professor and Director of the Transformative Technology Lab at Sophia University in the heart of Silicon Valley, where we research how seekers can become finders and how finders can become explorers so that they can live their most powerful and purposeful life, so that you can live your most powerful and purposeful life. I get questions all the time around spiritual powers. You know, can people materialize gold rings out of thin air? Can people communicate mind to mind? Did the people that we interviewed for our research, levitate around the room? Was there only one chair in the room for me and they just kind of floated there? What was the story? So these questions, of course, come because of our over decade of research at this point with thousands of people around the world who report things like enlightenment, non-duality, persistent mystical consciousness, transcendental consciousness, you name it. We've got a couple hundred words for this, collected from every corner of the earth, basically, at this point. We, of course, call it Persistent Non-Symbolic Experience, or PNSE. It's our academic bucket term for it, if you will. Well, I've got some bad news for you. If you're hoping that your progress towards persistent non-symbolic experience is going to get you to the point where you just hold out your hand and gold rings fall from it, unfortunately, we saw that did not be the case in our research. We didn't have a lot of people floating around the room. Can't really report that anybody in our research floated around the room or didn't need a chair unless they were sitting on the floor. So these are things that are very common. They're sort of very commonly reported. I think of them as very common myths out there. And, just to give you a little bit of an interesting story, these things are far more common in some cultures than in others. And so they're very common, for instance, when you travel in India and when we were conducting research in India and things like that. There's sort of this expectation around someone being able to really perform miracles, if you will. Obviously, if you experience PNSE, you must be able to do these types of things. And they're looked at as evidence. And I think it's understandable that they're looked at as evidence because, frankly, if I were to put you in a room with 50% people who experience PNSE and 50% of people who don't, and you were just to go around and have a normal conversation with them, you probably couldn't pick out who was on the PNSE side of the fence and who wasn't. People appear essentially normal. They go on with there's kind of this normal outer conditioning shell that we all have. That's how we interact with the world, and it's been programmed very diligently for our entire life in terms of how to react in different situations and what to say when somebody says something to you and whatnot. And so when you're in a new social situation and all of those things are up, probably you're not going to be able to tell the PNSE people from the not PNSE people unless, some of them had robes on or something like that. If you were participating in one of my experiments, I might have a little fun with you by giving the non-PNSE people the robes just to see if you would think, oh, wow, they were so wise. They must have been the PNSE people. So just a little bit of a heads up around this, because there are cultures, of course, that really want to enforce a belief around this type of thing, around sort of special powers and whatnot accompanying persistent non-symbolic experience. And it's understandable because, it would be very convenient if there was just sort of some label that somebody got or some sort of glow that somebody got that experienced this. But in the thousands of people that we've dealt with at this point in research, that simply isn't the case. We don't have, reports of this. We don't have video of people floating around the room or anything like that. So sorry to disappoint you if you're, planning to have your retirement be around rings with diamonds and gold that you could manifest at will once you transition into persistent non-symbolic experience. But, remember, PNSE is incredible, right? You get so many other remarkable benefits. It's such an amazing way of experiencing the world. The balanced mental state, the positive emotionality that can often accompany this, the clear mind, not crowded by a bunch of doubt and sort of negative, self-referencing type thoughts. Just so many, many powerful things that we've talked about in our research that you can see in other videos and papers from us and interviews and things like that. So please, please, please don't get hung up on the fact that you're not going to be able to materialize gold unless you're the first research subject that we meet that can do that, in which case, please email me after watching this video, right? But assuming that that's not you and that's not going to be you, I hope you'll take some solace in the fact that PNSE is really a remarkable way to experience the world. You get all of the other sort of more normal, if you will, benefits in terms of how the world shows up for you. And I will add one other thing, and that is that there's often an increase in people's sense of synchronicity or people's sense of flow. I like to say that they go from having a task flow to having a life flow. What I mean by that is the flow, if you look it up online, there's a bunch of psychological research around something called flow, and people do all kinds of stuff to get into flow. You know, they throw themselves off mountains with parachutes on their back, and they just do all sorts of stuff to stop that mental chatter to come really into the present moment, all of these things that PNSE does for you, and they're just trying to get a glimpse of it. They're doing all this crazy stuff just to get a glimpse of it. In PNSE, of course, it's a persistent thing. It's there from moment to moment. You're in the present moment. You're not nagged by past anxieties or doubts or things like that, or you don't have anxious futures or anything like that. You know, you have that clear mind and that present moment awareness and all of that right here and right now. So what goes along with that is often a sense of increased flow in your life. And that's why I like to call it life flow versus task flow. Task flow is when you're maybe in a sport and you're really in it and you're in the zone, or you've thrown yourself off a mountain with a backpack on, or whatever else. So you do get life flow. There is a sense of increased synchronicity for sure. Kind of these are meaningful coincidences that occur in your life. So that absolutely happens as well. But sorry to say, don't know about floating around the room or manifesting gold bars.